Today we have two major items on the agenda. One has to do with the follow-up meeting with the Ministry of Science and Technology and the Office of the Prime Minister, and we'll be having discussions with the National Energy Solutions Limited and the Universal Service Fund. And we had invited some persons to meet with us for this meeting, including the chairman of both of those entities and the ex-managing directors. After that, we have invited for 12 o'clock, we had invited the UDC, which came 2 weeks ago, but we were unable to take them due to the running overtime in the meeting. Subsequent to that, I read in the media that the managing director or general manager who was here 2 weeks ago has subsequently disengaged from the organization. So I don't know who will be leading the UDC, and I suspect it is something we could ask about the circumstances surrounding what has transpired in the last 2 weeks. So before we go in, members, we have before us the minutes of the meeting of September the 5th and September the 16th. They were sent out electronically, and they are, well, yes. What I would ask is, if there are no corrections, I would ask somebody to move for the minutes of the meeting of September 5th. Move, seconded by Member Vaz, and for the meeting of September the 15th. No corrections? Sorry, September 12th. So moved, Member Paulwell, seconded by Member Stewart. Okay, all right, so members, I'm going to invite in the Ministry of Science and Technology, the Office of the Prime Minister. In doing so, I would indicate that there are some questions that were asked at the last meeting, read the media, etc. All members would have the response. Good. So with that, I proceed. Could you please, where's the orderly? All right. Good morning, PS Swell and Acting PS Murray. Okay. Yeah, just wondering, still acting? Okay. All right. I'm not certain. I, members asking if it's more than 6 months.
No, it has only been a matter of weeks.
Okay. All right. I think we could start today by introducing the members of the delegation, and there were a number of people who were invited at the last meeting. So, member Pierswell and Murray, if you please.
Sure. Morning, Chairman. Morning, committee members. Joaquin Murray, Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Science and Technology. And with me is the Universal Service Fund, senior management staff members, as well as the CEO, former, Mrs. Buchanan, who's sitting behind me, and beside me, the chairman, Mr. Robert Lawrence.
That's from Universal
Service Fund.
And of course, the rest of your team. Okay.
The rest of the persons are representatives from the Universal Service Fund management team. We have the acting CEO who would have been here at the last sitting of the PAC, Mrs. Badro, and the other members of the team from the USF.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Morning, Chairman and members of the committee, colleagues. I have with me Ms. Michelle Forbes, Chief Technical Director, Office of the Prime Minister with responsibility for energy. Mr. Fitzroy Vidal, Principal Director, Energy. Mrs. Janet Coleman Howlett, Acting Principal Director, Office of the Prime Minister. We also have Mrs. Angela Prendergast, Acting CEO, Nestle. Mr. Kirk Borton, hope I got it right. Okay. Acting Chief Engineer, Nestle. Mr. Raymond Hamilton, Supervisor, Nestle. And I'm told that Mrs. Carolyn Warren is also here, former Managing Director, Nestle.
Just a question, Chairman. Mr. Brown used to be the Chief Engineer. Is he going to be here as well?
Morning, morning, Chairman. Morning, members. No, he actually applied for some extension based on personal reasons. Oh, sick? No, I'm sorry. Sick leave. Yes, it's a sick leave.
Pardon? Could you? I'm a little confused. Repeat that. I didn't hear. It wasn't in the mic. Oh, it's not working.
Mr. Brown is on sick leave, extended. He asked for extension of sick leave. Applied for
He remains the
extension.
Chief Engineer, though, right?
Yes, he is the Chief Engineer.
Members, at the last meeting, in addition to Mr. Lawrence, Ms. Buchanan, and Ms. Warren, we had also invited the chairman of the National Energy Solutions Limited, Nestle, Mr. Oswald Williams, to appear with us today as we were seeking clarification. There's a letter here which is dated September 21st, but we received it at 4:45 yesterday, the 20. Oh, you received it, sorry, at 4:45 yesterday, 25th of September. And the members, we here in Parliament received it this morning. I read the letters addressed to the Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Audrey Sewell. It says, Dear Permanent Secretary, further to my telephone discussion with you today, I am to confirm that at my direction, the Audit Committee of the Board, with the guidance of an outside audit professional, has been requested to carry out a forensic audit of the management operations of NESAL in light of the many issues raised and the questions posed by the PAAC. I think this is necessary to bring clarity to all the issues, including the way in which contracts have been awarded. As you will appreciate, these are all management and operational matters and, strictly speaking, have no direct board involvement. The exercise, I'm told, will take another 6 weeks. In light of this, I kindly ask the PAAC chairman for a postponement until the report is ready, a copy of which will be supplied. It's signed by Mr. Williams and copied to Most Honorable Andrew Holness, Prime Minister. Members, we have been seeking clarity, and I think doing an audit now is something that maybe should have been done a long time ago. And there are investigations taking place as well. Personally speaking, I am not inclined. I think that Mr. Williams, there is information we want. We are not dealing with, while there are matters of contracts, etc., there are other issues of how the board approached the hiring of persons in the organization, the information that they had about what was happening in an organization under their stewardship. And therefore, I believe certainly that Mr. Williams' presence is important for clarity at the committee. But those are my thoughts. I put it out to the members of the committee as to how we would proceed, given this information. Member Paulwell?
Yeah. Chairman, I find the letter completely unacceptable. In the letter, Mr. Williams is seeking to shift the responsibility of a board, as I know it to be, to the management. There are some crucial governance issues in relation to the operations of the board. And that is why I believe we had wanted his presence here. You did invite him. I think you might now have to use the next approach, which is to compel him to be present. I think there are some important issues that need to be addressed by him as chairman of the board.
Is that the opinion of the committee?
Mr. Chairman, I think there's a presumption that's made about what the chairman wrote in the letter that I don't think should be made. I think the letter should be taken as is. Words used were words like shifting blame. I mean, those are pejorative words that I do not believe we need to use at this point in time.
And if it will make the substantive point stand, which is to compel him to be here, I will certainly withdraw those words.
Yes. Member Waiter?
Yes. I think, though, that given the fact that he's seeking to inform himself before attending the committee, then I think
Yes.
given that reality, then we could give him some time. I don't. That's my view.
Members, quite frankly, I believe there are two courses of action open. The legal counsel, we had a discussion, hence the delay this morning, has indicated we do have the power of summons. We have two options. He has written here indicating that he would like to an extension. my position would be that this letter is unacceptable. I think that we need to continue our deliberations. The oversight that we are providing, the board was supposed to be providing that oversight, and therefore, with the breakdown that we have found happening, it is incumbent on the chairman of the board to at least explain his stewardship to us and for us to get clarity.
Mr.
So I'm just saying there are two ways. One is to, as Member Paul has indicated, and I think is one course open to us, is for us to trigger the summons through the Parliament for him to attend. The other is for us to indicate to him that we are not agreeing with the circumstances here, and for want of a better word, strongly invite him again before invoking the power. But it is something that I would like the committee to decide on, and we'll take it from there.
Mr. Chairman.
I would support the latter, in the sense that if we summon him, it is going to take even more time, longer time.
Pardon?
No, I say I would agree with you on the latter.
No, but if we're summoning it for next week, it's not. I find this unacceptable. Quite frankly, to say that you know at this point in time you're going to ask for an audit and ask for 6 weeks is, I think, unacceptable.
So that's what I'm saying. So I said I would go with the latter and sending him a strong letter to say he needs to come.
Okay. So what we are agreeing on is that he should be compelled to come to the next meeting. Now, what we are having a debate on is whether that compelling should be by means of a strongly worded invitation or a summons.
No, but
Mr. Chairman,
what I was saying is that the summons would take a long time, because you will have to go through a process, maybe even to the DPP. I don't know.
No. Yes, Member William. Sorry. Yes.
Right.
I'm recognizing you.
Mr. Chairman, the chairman did not indicate that he will not come to PAAC. He simply asked for more time. This committee can decide that 6 weeks is too long. It can be a shorter period of time. I don't see why we have to move to a summons. He never said he wouldn't come to the committee. He has agreed. He's just saying, let me get more information so I'm fully prepared when I come here. It doesn't mean that the board has not been working, he has not been working. He has just asked to get more in-depth information. There have been a lot of questions, and I'm sure he does not want to feel ill-prepared to be at PAAC.
Chair, it is unfortunate that we're getting this letter at such a late time after giving the chairman 2 weeks to at least respond. We have had entities...
No, for the record, just for clarity, there was an invitation for a week, and the notice was too short.
Too short, and
then
we gave,
2 weeks.
Right,
yes.
and then we gave an additional 2 weeks. We have had in the past entities appearing in front of us while audits and investigations are being done. We have a responsibility as a committee for oversight. Now, there are some issues that we had sent some questions to Nessel. We got response. When they came here the last time, when we posed those questions to the acting managing director, she then referred us that there are board matters and only the chairman can respond. I don't think we need a forensic audit for him to appear in front of us to answer some of those questions that we as a committee need to ask. These are operational matters that the chairman himself would be able to answer. Chairman, I feel offended as a member of this committee to get that letter this morning. I don't see any reason why the chairman himself could not appear in front of the committee. you know, I don't think we, at this point, and I heard the member saying that he's not saying that he's not willing to appear. But after giving 2 weeks, I think the chairman is showing disrespect to the committee itself. And he should be summoned to come and appear in front of the committee. And that's my position. I think he should be summoned at this point in time to come and appear in front of the committee.
Thank you, Chairman. I do think that the chairman is obliged to be here, but I would say that in this particular climate and the fact that both this ministry, the agencies have been aired thoroughly and is still being aired and ought to be aired, it is being done, there is ample reason for us to temper justice with mercy. The persona of the chairman is not someone who is offensive. He is someone who I have always found to be accommodating and thing. And I'm saying in the climate, we all know what has been taking place. I don't think there is need to apply hostility. The gentleman is what I have known him to be, a gentleman. And therefore, I think it is sufficient to say to him, because he's obliged to be here, look, it is not accepted, please, we need you to come. That is how I see it. Not in all situations. We don't have to exact or pound of flesh on every occasion, because the wheels of life turn all the while. And one day we are here, one day we're here, and the other way the other. So I do feel, as I say, that he's obliged to be here, but I don't take any offense. He's not an offensive person. He's someone that I have considered a gentleman, and he just needs to be notified that the committee has decided. Well, as I say, let us temper justice with mercy and let him know.
Pierce, the letter indicates that there was a discussion with you.
And that is in our report.
Elaborate a bit on, because we have to make a decision here. And
well, I speak with Mr. Williams for different reasons. He's a chairman of NISL, not just for whatever happens here, but I recall a discussion that as follow-up to the letter that was sent prior, to remind him, because Ms. Bailey kept writing to ask for update on whether there was confirmation from the persons who were invited. And that he may have been referring to that particular reminder that Parliament needed to know. And his response was that he was considering it and he would get back to me.
He was considering what?
The invitation that he had got, because we wrote. And then because Ms. Bailey kept writing to ask, I spoke with him to tell him that Parliament...
This is a telephone conversation yesterday.
No, his telephone of the 21st.
Of the 21st,
yes.
Sorry, yes.
But, yeah, we spoke. I can't recall that it was the 21st because we speak about other matters. But I recall...
at that time he was...
He had received, yes, and he was not in a position at that time to confirm whether he would be attending.
You did advise him that he should attend.
Well, remember I sent him a written invitation, yes, and I told him that I had got reminders from Ms. Bailey, and she wanted to know whether there was confirmation from any of the invitees.
All right, members.
Chairman,
yes,
as my colleague, Mrs. Dalrymple Philibert, has indicated, I don't know Mr. Williams to be an offensive man. And
but we can, yes,
when I look at the correspondence, it's the first time I'm seeing it. The language, it doesn't suggest that a man who doesn't intend to come here. And if we look at the procedures which are applicable
which apply in the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal or wherever we are, tribunal generally, they tend to be facilitatory. We don't, as it were, hold this sword of Damocles over, yes. And I'd invite you this morning, Chairman, to avoid such an approach. And I think we ought.
Yes, as a hold of the sword.
Indeed, sir.
Just that, Chairman, listening to, well, I don't know Mr. Williams as well as some of my other colleagues, but listening to the facts that I've heard since I've been here this morning and listening to the last piece of statement that the PS gave, the fact that the time period for the invitation was over 2 weeks, and the fact that he could state that he's considering that invitation, it goes to show that whether the language in the letter seems like, yes, he wants to come. I think a more forceful approach has to be taken to ensure that he does come based on the fact that he got enough time to gather any information that he would have needed to come to this committee. I think 2 weeks is sufficient time for any chairman or any CEO who knows what is happening in their organization to gather any level of information to come to a committee to answer questions. I would go with the first option that you had indicated.
Chairman, with all due respect, sir, I think time is of
the committee meeting. When I say unacceptable to ask for an extension of 6 weeks is when we're in the midst of our deliberations is not something I think that should be considered now. It is my considered opinion, just listening to the comments, that Mr. Williams should be asked to attend the next meeting of the committee. The question is whether or not it should be by means of an invitation or by means of us invoking the summons of Parliament. But at the end of the day, what we want is to fulfill the goal of having us being able to get all the information that we require to have a clear, open, and transparent discussion on this matter. Members, I've heard both sides, and I'm somewhat swayed by Member Dalrymple has made a passionate plea, and I would ask the committee to suggest that what we do is strongly invite Mr. Williams, very strongly, and Member Dalrymple, this is as somebody you know well, and PS, I would invite you to use your powers of persuasion as may be to indicate that we will require him at the next sitting next week, Wednesday. However, I am also minded by other members of the committee who want to invoke the power of summons, and I would just indicate that if we do not get the presence next week, then, as they say, those who have ears to hear, let them hear.
Just to add, Chairman, so let us stop using that term with regards to inviting some of these persons.
I suspect that the message has been sent.
You know, Chairman?
Yes.
I waited for your decision, and I just want to say publicly that I want to thank you. And I'm not surprised that your delegates voted you as one of the vice presidents of the People's National Party. And I always believe, no, and I'm saying this seriously, I always believe there has to be balance, balance between experience and age. I'm going to allow my younger colleague here to my immediate left to learn that, you know, in life, life is a balance. And I want to thank you because, as I said, I have found that chairman to be a gentleman. And I said, I preface my words by saying in the particular climate. And I want to thank you because I know there is much pressure everywhere for you to do otherwise.
Chairman.
And I really want to thank you. And I'm sure that it is going to yield exactly what we want to achieve in this parliament rather than just attack and hostility. And I want to thank you. I waited, you know, and I felt sure in my heart you were going to come to the decision that you did. Thank you, knowing the person that you are.
Chairman.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Yes.
Could I think we need to commend those persons who did accept the invitation.
Absolutely.
Especially Mrs. Warren and Ms. Buchanan, who are no longer in the employ of the government. And what this means, Madam PS, is that you're going to have to come back here again. That is the effect of what has happened with this letter. And I really believe it's a pity because you have been here so often. And I figure you could do without that intrusion again, but that's what it means. I should also say that and my colleague who is a member of the bar knows that a summon is not an offensive act, but you have made a decision and we will await next week's meeting.
Yes. And I think the committee, if unfortunately we do not get the presence next week, I think that the committee will be united in its approach. All right? Okay, so members, I think that we can proceed. Member Phillips has just brought that we can clarify it at the end of the meeting, but with our members here, the Minister of Finance and Public Service indicated to me yesterday that they would like us to take the supplementary budget next week. And that while I have not formally gotten a request for the date, he indicated that he was seeking to get it passed on Tuesday of next week. That now, and maybe the Minister of State is here, so we may be able to. Sorry, Minister without portfolio. My apologies, Minister Williams. What that would mean, the only way that we would be able to accomplish that would be to meet on Tuesday morning. And that would mean that the committee would be meeting Tuesday and Wednesday. I need for the committee to, Member Williams, do you have any, can you give us any enlightenment? No. Is it in fact, if we are going to take it, it means that the committee, because it would mean that today or tomorrow morning I'm going to receive a request from the Ministry of Finance, your ministry, at which time we are going to now have to sort of make ourselves available for Tuesday, which would affect a sitting on Wednesday, I suspect. If you're unable, I don't want to put you in a position.
I don't have any additional information to add beyond the request that Minister Clark has made.
All right, so members, we have to keep that in mind. Do you think it would be possible, Member Williams, for us to, before the meeting is over, given that today is Wednesday, for you to get some insight formally from the Minister of Finance, so that if needs be, we can inform the committee members as to how to proceed, and it would in fact impact on what happens in the meeting for next week Wednesday. All right? Okay, so members, I now would move to the Ministry of Science and Technology and the Office of the Prime Minister. Is there any particular method that we would like to, anyway, we'd like to proceed? All right, well, if that being the case, let me welcome you all, Ms. Warren, Ms. Buchanan, Mr. Lawrence, welcome. We had invited yourselves because of some questions that had arisen in our deliberations here. And because of that, we thought maybe you could add some clarity to us. So what I would do is just start with one issue that I discussed last week before last, which was of concern to me. And Mr. Lawrence, I would start because I saw some thing written in the paper, with some explanations. But I would start here because certainly for me, I was very concerned about one issue, which goes to governance, just general governance. We found at a period of time between 2016, the middle to late 2016 into 2017, that nearly every agency in the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology at that time changed their executive directors and brought in new personnel. And that this, certainly for me, is a very troubling thing because one of the strengths of our Westminster system is a continuity of the public sector, even in the face of change of political administration. At the time that you took over as chairman, Mr. Cross was the managing director, executive director, I'm not quite certain. You can use the microphone, yes.
He was the CEO.
He was the CEO. And I understand from the information that we got that Mr. Cross was, there was a previous board and that the previous board had extended or had re-signed his contract on termination. Had re-signed the contract on its termination, but that this was deemed to have been a bad thing, and he was dismissed for this reason. Is that basically the sequence of events?
Mr. Chair, good morning, and members. When we took over the entity to the board, and I try to make it plural, it's not Robert Lawrence as the board. I'm just first amongst equal.
Yes.
We looked at where the organization was and where it needed to go. So number of considerations. We look, so Mr. Cross, having retired from Cable and Wireless, some 10 years now at Universal Service Fund, we had a situation where you have several sites, a good portion of them not functioning, and just not being, the public not being aware enough of what Universal Service Fund is. So we determined that we need a little more energy to push the thing. But initially, we determined that we will drive this as a policy through the CEO, Mr. Cross. Got some pushback, but in that time, I asked for the board's latest contract to ensure everything is okay, because that Universal Service Fund, for your knowledge, is only short-term contract, 2 years. It works to your benefit sometimes as well. So I asked for it, was not produced. Eventually, we got it. And what concerns us is that, and just for clarity, So and members know that when you have an election, a letter goes out to all entities saying no new policy decision should be made during that period. That went out, and I think is for about February 4. February 25th, well, you know the outcome of the election. In April, the board was appointed, April 1. The last board meeting then would have been somewhere, it would have been about, I think it's February 11 of the previous board. When we asked for the contract and found the files, we realized that there were 2 contracts running. And the contract was executed 7 and 8 days after the new board was appointed. Now, the question that came to my mind is that when you make a decision like that, I'm now speaking to someone's mind, why would you make the effort to have the board in place and then seek to have the former board chairman execute the contract while we were there, dated the 7th and 8th of April? We found that's something we're not prepared to live with. And then again, it's really a judgment call. I mean, you may have done something, but that's what the board's position was. I tried, Chairman, I tried long and hard to keep the matter quiet.
Yeah, and I saw the writing. You had written something in the, it was in the paper, and I saw it. But as I said, and as you said, it's a judgment call, and the board, you know, and as I said, it in a sense a technicality. But just for the record, Mr. Cross was there for how long?
Would have been more than 10 years. I think it was about 6 to 9 at the time, so probably about 10 years.
So he went across various administrations?
Yes.
One to the other back, maybe 3, 4 administrations just about. Now, what were his qualifications?
Whilst on the job, the same year he completed his PhD.
Oh, you had a doctorate?
Yes, same year.
In what?
Can't tell you offhand.
Yeah, but yes. but technology related. Yeah. So, and you came in, when you said you came in, when did you start your board?
April 1, 2016.
And when did you come to this decision to terminate?
That would have been about August, July, August.
April, May, June, July. So 4 months.
Yes, it was not July. Yeah, July.
So in 4 months you did all this evaluation and determined.
Yes.
So you move now to hire someone new.
Yes.
Having not terminated or having terminated Mr. Cross. Is that correct? Or terminated the contract?
Yeah, we did not.
Or ruled it, whatever it was.
Well, because the contract signed after the new board, it being ultra virus, there was no contract in effect. And we choose not to renew. So, this matter was fully aired at the Ministry of Labor, just to let you know.
I saw you, as I said, you had written. So my question is, you then proceeded to hire someone new?
We went through the proper process of advertising and interviewing, committee review, and the process. Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Now, at the end of that process, you hired Ms. Buchanan.
Yes.
And did you have, in terms of hiring persons, did you have criteria? You're looking for the CEO of the Universal Service Fund. You have now terminated someone who has 10-year experience there, plus a doctorate. What were you looking for in the person who was to take over?
Okay. The board's position was, with close to, at the time, about $900 million in assets spread throughout the country, that we needed to get the public to use them. We needed to have the real penetration that they needed to do. And the emphasis, certainly for the first 2 years of office, we determined that we should get someone with the expertise to push the marketing and penetration. That was the decision.
You really haven't given me an answer, though.
No.
I mean, did you indicate that this person should have a master's, a PhD. Normally, in government agencies, you have a criteria for a CAO.
Yes.
Did you have a criteria?
There was, and it was advertised.
What was that?
Included a master's and/or the appropriate experience.
A master's and/or appropriate experience.
Yes.
Did you? So, and then at that point, you shortlisted the candidates.
Yes, and I want to again pluralize it, not me. The process is the application came in, a committee selected, goes through the committee, and then it is taken to the board for consideration.
And how many people were shortlisted? Do you remember?
4.
Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, the person who was selected, what were the qualifications of the person?
The person, you mean Ms. Buchanan, right?
Yes, of course.
Ms. Buchanan, Ms. Buchanan's experience was in marketing, and her experience, she was the former CEO of another government entity before.
Came in a straight track.
Came in a track. And so she was strong on the PR, and I must tell you, I'm not disappointed in terms of her effectiveness in getting the message out.
So, yeah, but again, you said her qualifications were? Yes, you said her qualifications were? Because you would have been on the panel, weren't you?
No.
Or you were neither?
No,
you
not on the panel.
shortlisting?
No, not on the panel at all, Mr. Chair.
Okay, but you are the chairman of the board.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, the qualifications were?
You have a score sheet that was done. And at the last 4.
Yeah, I know there's a discussion, but I'm just asking.
Yes.
You had indicated masters or equivalent.
Our experience, yes.
I'm asking what was the final, what were the qualifications at the time?
The committee did not share the required experience to do it, and it went purely on the experience in addition to the short-term nature of the contract. Hold a sec for me, Mr. Chair. Do you have?
If I'm permitted, I'll answer the question.
So absolutely.
At the time that my interview was conducted, I have a certificate from Canning College in the university, from Canning College in Australia, Western Australia, and also a certificate from CARIMAC, a Certificate of Merit in Communication. After I joined the organization, I started my master's in international business with law and will graduate in June of next year.
So, yeah, but I'm really going back to governance, Mr. Lawrence. I'm saying that, she had the certificates, but you had her based on experience.
Yes.
Yes, well, Pierce,
no. Let's
you need to start padding up because they're...
No, let's clarify, please.
Yes, please.
So she would have had the experience. She would have been a previous CEO. She would have those qualifications. It was a 2-year contract. So we wanted more than anything else at that time to get the penetration into the sector. So, what's the qualification? I should have said, Mr. Chair.
What?
No, the qualifications as she has said.
Okay. So, Mr. Lawrence, let me go a step further. Did you receive a letter from the political ombudsman?
Yes.
Do you recall the contents of the letter?
Yes. The questions were asked, and I responded because
you responded to the political ombudsman?
It is courteous. I will have to respond. Mr. Chair.
Yes, sorry, yes. Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, I responded stating No, I responded that because I was neither a political party,
that what?
No. the jurisdiction of the...
Hold on, you're going to be very uncomfortable. Yes, please. No, you can't. There, try that one. Try it there. Come. Where's the orderly? This is not, or maybe we could, I tell you what, Ms. Murray, if you could switch seats. Is your mic working?
Yes. Yes.
There you go. Turn off the one that you have there. Right, and switch seats. Have we been abandoned by the orderlies?
Yes, I responded that I couldn't provide with the detail that she is requesting. And because rightfully, if there's a matter of this nature, I would expect the Contractor General or the Auditor General or the Minister or on the ATI to ask some information. But I didn't consider it prudent to send the information out. I just feel like the jurisdiction was lacking in that area.
Hold on, could you repeat that, please? I really am certain I didn't hear that correctly.
Well,
so let me just get this clear. You did not think that the political ombudsman had authority to question you?
No, I tell you, Mr. Chair, I don't want to be...
No, but maybe clarify it for me.
I was not sure whether or not under the Telecoms Act that I could provide this information to the political ombudsman. I was not sure. And I sought some advice and I replied appropriately.
So you told the political ombudsman that you were not going to respond to these questions?
Maybe in essence, but I'll have to have sight of the letter to show you. This was not in the question you have listed, so I didn't bring the letter with me.
But close enough. The fact is you didn't respond.
No, I responded.
No, you responded.
But did not send the details.
Did not send the details. The question sent.
I did not send the details. Yes.
Yes, and you do understand that there were real concerns, because the reason I asked about, and the political ombudsman I had asked, is that in the short listing of persons, there seem to have been persons who were very highly qualified, with maybe a little more than just experience. And therefore, it brings into question your judgment, simply because I understand, and I'm not calling any names, but I understand that you had persons with double bachelors and masters from MIT applying with 10 years experience who did not get the job, and yet you hired someone based solely on experience. And the fact that this person, the question was asked in relation to...
Chairman, may I seek your...
Sure, absolutely.
Is this information upon which you're proceeding, is this part of the brief which has been provided to the other members? I'm totally lost.
A brief?
Yes.
No, we're simply asking about the employment.
Chairman, all this information about the resume for persons, I'm not certain.
That I was simply asking a question. I simply asked, are you aware of persons with masters and other things who were applying and experience? Would that have come to you as chairman of the board?
No.
Or it didn't come to you?
No.
So what is the process then?
The process is a selection. There's a committee determined by the board. It's taken, the documentation is sent there, and it's recommended to the board.
I just want to ask, so when the recommendation is made, when it comes to the board, were you present at that board meeting that then accepted the evaluation of the committee?
Yes.
Yeah,
And an evaluation sheet would have put the CEO then at the time with the highest rating.
Even with the requirements that was set out in the ad of having a master's, even though you said even
No, that's not what it said. That's not what it said.
And let me behaving like pit bulls. I'm just asking a question.
No, well, let him answer, no, man.
Members.
No, but I'm just trying to.
Members.
I'm just trying to enlighten you.
Members, I think what we're trying to get at, members, and this goes to the
Mr. Chairman, I am asking the member to withdraw that comment about pit bulls. Sir, it's very offensive. He needs to withdraw that.
Well, members, let us not disintegrate, please. Let me just be clear. Members, please, let us be clear. And I want to put back in context the reason for my questions. We have a situation where we have seen a pattern in all the agencies where all the CEOs were changed.
Chairman, and may I seek another intervention here? I'm not sure that our role is to start to express opinions on information we're receiving. We're determining the truth of that information.
I make a point that, let me be clearer then. Every agency changes CEO. If you don't want it as a pattern, it is a fact.
Well, the judge in any and chairman in these proceedings ought not to descend into the arena. I've heard several expressions of opinions being expressed. And this certainly doesn't inure to our benefit.
Point of order. Chairman, I know that you have started with certain questions. And I think it's appropriate for you to pursue that. I am next in line.
Yes, okay. So the point, Sir Lawrence.
Yes.
I think what I would like to get at is the criteria. So you would have all the persons who had applied. You would have them and the process that you went by.
Yes, there would be a process, yes. There is a process and documentations are there.
Yes, and could you just repeat once again, the hiring was not based on the academic qualifications, but on experience?
Mr. Chair, and I'll be bold to say that I am sure we want truth, right, and not bits and pieces of facts.
Absolutely.
Right, good. So truth is, we wanted someone to drive the organization. We advertised for including masters and or experience. The assessment took place, and she won the position. And I put it to you, we all know about USF now. In fact, this very sitting is promoting USF.
Is what?
This very sitting that we have is making the information of USF gets wider. Yes. Well, I don't know, member. The truth is.
Member Paulwell, I have you.
Yes. Thank you very much. Chairman. I do have a series of questions in relation to the Universal Service Fund. And as you've started on the business of the board and its composition, I would like to inquire, because I recall when it was established, the telecoms providers sat on the board.
Yes.
Has that continued?
Absolutely.
So you have the two telecoms providers on the board of the USF now?
Well, let me explain what happened. Just to put in context, because I hear this thing I go over the radio, which is really just, a lot of disingenuous, because the information is available and it's public knowledge. When the board was appointed, we had 2 telecoms providers. One from Digicel, one from Cable and Wireless. Subsequent to that, the one from Digicel resigned from the sector. And so she resigned, left that vacancy, wasn't filled. The one from Cable and Wireless served right up until April, when she left that entity and went into another sector. So throughout all...
Hold on, please, 1 second.
Okay.
Sit back a little bit. Yes, you're right.
And so throughout all the period, you had the position there. But don't forget as well, too, members and chairman, you have a member from the PIOJ who sits on the board, a member from the Ministry of Finance, and a member from the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology who sits on the board.
I'm still on the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Is it true that the organization has doubled in staff since 2016?
There are some temporary staff to carry out all the activities that are taking place.
So the question is it true that the organization has doubled in size?
No, you see, I can't say that. I can't say that it has doubled, because to double you need the permission of the Ministry of Finance to put in the permanent structure. But the ministry does give some liberty in having temporary staff to have urgently executed matters.
Right. I want to deal with some specific allocations that have been made in relation to the operations of the USF. It is my understanding that the USF has created a hotspot in Olympic Gardens. Is that so? And could you just say how much was the cost of that?
No, I'm the chairman. I'm not in operations. So I can't give that details. But I'll tell you, I know why we choose to select only.
I'm going to go through some others.
Oh, so it's clarity.
Yes.
There's Devon House. There is Halfway Tree. There is a one in Williams Grand Park.
Right. So that's answer.
Yeah,
It is true.
Yes.
I want to hear all of them.
Junction, and the other one, Mandeville Park. So it's been done. Yes. And so your question now is that if there's at Olympic Way.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Earlier when we were questioning Petrojam, we were told of certain contributions made to Homestead Citizens for Action, Hampstead Park Community, McCook's Pen Citizen Association, and Sydenham. These are in a particular constituency, the former minister's constituency. Have your board approved similar projects in these same locations as Petrojam did?
Mr. Chairman, and member would know that I first entered the sector whilst you were in it. I was on your Telecommunication Advisory Council. I don't ask political affiliation.
You just approve?
If it meets the criteria, you approve it. I mean, we don't do that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, but the reason why I am interested is because the same institutions were dealt with by Petrojam are the same institutions that I gather the USF has also approved and for similar funding.
Yes.
So could you provide us with the approved projects in relation to Homestead Citizens for Action, Hampstead Park Community, McCook's Pen Citizen Association, and Sydenham?
Would you think it would be more useful then if you're going along that line to provide all the sites with political affiliation beside them?
Absolutely. Yes, I don't have a difficulty with that.
I'm asking you now.
I don't have a difficulty with that because it will still prove the point.
You see, what we don't want, Mr. Chair, is for it to be seen that we're selecting one set and giving the detail. I've never asked.
Yes. No, I'm not. Hold it, man.
No, we can't start treating the people. We're inviting people here and start treating them like commoners.
Please, members.
So all I want is to verify
that information,
Yes.
but if you have others, no problem.
Right.
And to correlate it to the approval that PetroJam had done in relation to those institutions as well. Mr. Chairman, there are some other questions.
Yes,
It is my understanding that the USF contracted both NESOL in one respect, and we're going to come back to that, and UTEC in another respect to employ a host of persons on its behalf to do certain projects. Are you aware of that? And could you just give me some details on the UTEC side, firstly?
I have no knowledge of what is it. Repeat again for me that the youth fund that the unit that UTEC has employed.
What is the arrangement between USF and UTEC?
None to my knowledge.
Nothing.
Nothing.
There's been no relationship in relation to. Yeah.
We have no agreement with UTEC member.
All right, fair enough. CMU. How much fund have the body approved for the CMU? Yes, can you answer the question?
Yes, I'm just trying to. So you asking me how much was approved for
CMU in the last 2 years?
In terms of what?
Funding.
Funding.
Yes.
I know which was well publicized just before they became a university. Yeah, where we supported them for the lab, which is about $300 million.
Yeah, but how much money?
About $300 million it was. Speak from memory.
$300 million.
Yes.
Dollars have been approved. Yeah. Right. So we now need to understand.
Hold on, please, Mr. Terlang, please.
We now need to understand.
Running commentary is not helpful to the committee.
Well, Mr. Chairman, with the greatest of respect, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, it would be helpful if other members were allowed to ask questions as well, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
With respect, Mr. Chairman, one member has been dominating for the last 20 minutes, Mr. Chairman. There are other members who would like to ask questions, Mr. Chairman. It cannot be that we sit here until 12:30 for one member to ask questions and to go down a particular line. There are other members who would like to ask questions to the Chairman. And I'm happy that the funding was made to the university. I'm happy that these things are being done to promote education in Jamaica. Well done, Mr. Lawrence.
Mr. Terlang, two things. I find that when persons are asking questions, including you take as much time as you feel is necessary.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I disagree.
Absolutely.
I have never had 20 minutes to ask any questions, Mr. Chairman. And if it is that we're going to be leaving here by 1 p.m., Mr. Chairman, other members should be allowed to ask questions, Mr. Chairman. That's all I'm saying.
Mr. Terlang, more to the substantive point, I would ask you when your colleagues are speaking, it's not necessary to have a running commentary.
Very well, Mr. Chairman. If Mr. Chairman, perhaps going forward, I'm going to make the point, Mr. Chairman. Perhaps going forward, if each member could be allowed just 5 minutes, Mr. Chairman, and then we can circulate, Mr. Chairman. Each member allowed 5 minutes. If you could take a vote on it, each member is allowed no more than 5 minutes at every given time.
That has nothing. Please, I am making up. I'm making up, Mr. Terlang.
I would humbly
could you
request
please, I will give you a second,
that we tell
please.
Mr. Terlang to deal with this outside of the
please stop the running commentary.
Chairman, you're not going to get anywhere in terms of the question issue. I can tell you the members of this committee who are on the government side have a strong objection to the length of time that some individuals are given to act. Mr. Terlang, please. Member Terlang. So I don't think this is the place for us to have this particular discourse. We should meet privately and lay out how we would want as a committee to proceed. This is not the venue for it.
Absolutely, Member Holness. Member Paulwell, but I will say Member Paulwell, please continue, but.
Right, so I was going on now to the relationship between NESOL and the Universal Service Fund. And the first question has to do with why would USF contract NESOL to provide a service for which NESOL itself had to contract or subcontract with another party, Peak and Energy Company Limited.
Now, to the best of our knowledge, Chairman.
Please, member hold this. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
NESOL is held out as having its capabilities. We didn't know it was outsourced. It's a government entity that clearly have some substance and accomplishment over the years in its former name and in its present. So they have the skill set, and we assigned it to them.
So you didn't know that it was going to subcontract it?
No.
Right. And we had learned subsequently that the chairman of your projects committee was Mrs. Warren, who was the CEO at NESOL.
Yes, that is true.
Oh, okay.
So she's a member of the board. Yes. So there's nothing irregular about that, to us, Mr.
I'm just trying to get from you some answers as to whether it's irregular or not. Afterwards, we will.
Yes. Yes. So she is on the board.
Well, was.
Yeah, she was on the board. She was on the board, and yes, she is at NESOL, sister agency.
And was the chairman of the projects committee?
At a point, yes.
No, at the point.
At which point?
The point when she served as a member of your board.
Yes, but there was also a project chair before her. Yes, you're speaking about a 2-year period, so there was one before than her. And I think I asked you a question. Answer the question.
Mr. Chairman, I was looking through the reports of the board, and I've noticed that the fees for directors have almost trebled in 2 years. What would account for that?
I'm not here. The fees.
The board directors' fees. Why would it treble in 2 years?
I'm not just treble, but I'll tell you what's the difference. So you had in the period before that the board would meet, the former board would meet perhaps every other month. Now, the new corporate governance says, with that size of money that you have under your responsibility, you can casually meet every month. Because it means that you'll be given the authority without any oversight, and a lot can happen during that period.
So you're saying that, sorry, I think the active permanent secretary is going to assist.
Just to add to, well, I'm not going to speak about the number of meetings that they've had.
Because is it true that the meeting schedule
was, what I wanted to clarify for the committee is that the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service did approve an increase in the board fees. I'm not remembering exactly how much it was and when, but that would have been an increase over what was the previous amount. And that happened sometime between 2016 and 17, I believe it was. So in addition to what the chairman is saying in terms of the number of times the board would be meeting, i.e. monthly, then you would have that information as well, an increase in the board fees.
Right. I also clarify too that under the FAA Act and the combination of the Public Management Act, there is a requirement for an entity of this size that you must have an audit committee. Audit committee.
Yes.
Yeah, separate and apart. So you would have some adjustment made and rearrangement for effective governance, member.
Okay. So just summarizing now, you'll provide us with the information in relation to those CAP projects?
Yes.
Specifically those that I've cited, but you wanted to
I'll give you all the sites and the designation.
And just to recap, you have had no relationship with UTEC in this at all?
I have none. You mean if you have ever given them money?
USF.
You mean if USF has ever given them money?
Yes.
At any point in time?
Yes.
Yeah, so with CASE, UTEC,
no, but
UA.
This fund, the funds that you would have given to them, what was it for? What
any fund they have, any fund they have would have been approved even before this board got there. And it would put a normal ICT support that we do for all the third.
So nothing new has come to UTEC?
No.
Just for ICT infrastructure, member.
Okay.
It's just the regular where a university would make an application and an assessment and evaluation is done in terms of the need, and then they are given that support if it's a need. So there has been no other additional relationship, at least during the period that I was there, with the UTEC and the Universal Service Fund.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask some question of Nessel, but I suppose other members would like to speak to yourself.
So I have Member Holness had a question, and then I have Member Jackson, Member Dalrymple, and Member Stewart. If there's anybody else, please let me know. Member Holness?
Not questions, Chairman. First, Mr. Lawrence, I heard Chairman and some members belaboring a point as it relates to qualification versus experience. I want to reiterate, when it's very quiet in the room, that the requirement for the position was a master's qualification or not and the requisite experience. In the work world, you find a lot of persons who quarrel that they are qualified and can't get jobs because experience trumps qualification for many. You equally have persons well qualified who are hired and you cannot figure out how they came by the qualifications that they have. So, Mr. Lawrence, I have no issue from my side with someone being employed who has demonstrated through experience their capability to function in a previous organization, as you did in your case. And I want to make that point for the country. As it relates to, let me finish, Chairman. Let me finish and then you speak, because I don't want to lose my train of thought.
No, Member
As
Holness,
it relates
just
to
1
the
second,
question
please.
asked by Member Paulwell.
Member Holness,
Let me finish.
please.
I don't want to lose my train of thought, Chairman.
Yeah, but Member Holness.
I'm going to lose my train of thought, I don't write down a long list of
Member
stuff.
Holness, I know you better. I know you well enough to know you could never lose your train of thought over something
Right.
as simple as that. Member Holness, I heard the statement you gave, and I think possibly when you had finished, I had indicated when I was discussing it with the chairman, that I think that PS Sewell, I think some discussion on the government procedural guidelines for hiring may be important, because I do think that we have to be careful that we're really saying things that are not necessarily government policy. So
Chairman,
I just
thank
made
you
the
for that,
point
because
once
now
you
you've helped me
finish.
to remember something else.
No.
So, Chairman, let me add to the statement you have made, that as a government, my observation as a young person, now turned member of parliament, is that there are many people who sit down in the service of the government and become very qualified, not necessarily individuals who perform. I remember spending some time at Ministry of Finance, and you had some persons in the government service that work 3 people's job. They worked very, very hard. And then you had others who became more and more qualified and did nothing. From my point of view, Chairman, and I will make this statement, and I hope PS, who you have asked to look at it, will take such a look at persons. Because you asked PS. It's not the space. It's not the space. Not you, PS. PS
Yes.
in finance. You're asking?
No. I was just going to ask. Yeah.
Well, PS, since Chairman is asking you to take a look, my own experience, having done consultancy work with the government, is that there are some persons in the government service that work like a horse, hours on end. I found other persons who had the opportunity to carry on a full-time job doing training, and they were teachers while hiring consultants. So, in looking at how we hire going forward, I believe we cannot just look at persons who have sat down in government service, become qualified, and not necessarily doing the job, and then belittle and almost make very rude people's professional qualification, whether in the government service or outside the government service, to be able to function in a particular job. What matters at the end of the day is not just the paper, but your ability to perform. So that was point number 1 for me.
I have been at PAAC in times gone by and continue to argue that once a request is made for information, I am going to ask that that information, since it is for so long, since NESOL was established, that it be for as long as a period of 8 years. Because when you look at figures, you are always required to put those figures in context. I don't like questions that don't contextualize. So, what is the level of activity that was existing at NESOL before February 2016 and before your new CEO was hired? What is the volume of activity? Who were the appointed community development teams, constituencies, institutions that we focused on in the previous 5 years, along with those that you currently focus on now that we are government? I would love to be able to put both the volume of expenditure with the volume of activity on one spreadsheet so that we can do a genuine and true assessment of performance, of where you have targeted, to see if there is anything that looks partisan about it versus what we are able to achieve. And Madam, I must say to you that I knew very little about NESOL and about the ICT type service from Universal Service Fund until recently. So I must commend you all for the volume of work done, and I would love to be able to see justification for expenditure versus performance and the volume of work executed. Thank you, USF.
The PS, the question, I think what we were, and just for Member Holness's clarity, I think government puts in place certain guidelines. And those guidelines are sort of set by Parliament. We indicate to you and what those guidelines are, and they're put in place to allow a sort of fairness to ensure that persons get jobs because of qualifications, because of what they bring to the table, rather than personal relationships and political affiliations. So it is those guidelines that are set in place. And I'm just saying that a lot of the discussions that we've had today have sort of questioned some of these. And I think the question that I was going to ask before is in the terms of the hiring of persons. What are the guidelines that exist now? Is it that the ministry has no role to play, or the permanent secretaries in these CEOs that are brought on board? How do we ensure that the guidelines that are supposed to be in place are followed? Because it is raising a lot of questions. We saw it at Petrojam, persons who were hired without the qualifications. And so those things bring into question. I'm not saying that there are persons who with lesser qualifications work hard and those who have more initiative. All of that is true. But there are certain guidelines that we put in place, and I'm just saying, is there any mechanism to ensure that those guidelines are being followed?
Sure, and I speak from my ministry. USF is not under me, but just generally, in the civil service, there are guidelines. Job descriptions are developed usually by the ministries, and they are sent to the Ministry of Finance for review and classification. And the Office of the Services Commission does conduct audits, regular audits of our HR systems. And that is one of the areas that they look at, our recruitment and selection practices. And we get reports, and we are required to submit responses to the reports as any regular audit. So yes, we are audited, our HR practices. In terms of the agencies, they are supposed to have their procedures manual. So for HR, they would have their manual, which we expect is sent to the Ministry of Finance for review and for ratification. So, and they are expected to have their internal systems in place to ensure proper monitoring. So, for example, in the ministries, we have what we call a HR committee. So decisions are, even if they are taken at the department level, they have to be approved by a committee that comprises members from across the ministry. So an appointment for somebody should go to the committee for approval, and that committee is chaired by the permanent secretary. But different agencies may have their different procedures.
So, Ms. Murray, you would have been at the ministry. During that process, would you have had oversight of what was happening at Universal Service Fund or at NESAL or the other places? Were you at all involved in the changes in staff that was taking place at that period of time?
Chairman, I believe this question was asked of the ministry before, and we did provide a response. We would have indicated that to the extent that an agency requests of the ministry and its HR in particular assistance with their primarily employment, not termination, we would provide that assistance. With respect to the two agencies, and we would have shared this before, the USF has never asked the ministry for assistance in this regard. We have received requests before from the eGov, for example, eGov Jamaica, and would have provided assistance in that regard. So the agencies who ask receive the ministry's guidance. If they don't ask, then they would not receive it. But they're not obliged to ask, Chairman, and we're only obliged to give the response if those requests come in.
All right, I have Member Jackson, and then I have Member Wilbert and Member Stewart. You're on it as well?
Chairman, I just have two questions from Mr. Lawrence seeking some clarification. One regarding the governance issue at the board and the representation by the telecom carriers. And I'm going to preface my question, Mr. Lawrence, with a bit of information. Members of the House have immunity under the privileges legislation of the country. Anyone who comes here and says something which is not true is perjury and is punishable under law for imprisonment or fine. If he's sworn. Objection. Sworn or not sworn. Once the committee is convened. If he's sworn. So whatever answer you give must be truthful. If not, there is a penalty of imprisonment or fine.
Before you go further, to give a preface of that, Mr. Chair, when I give of my time and effort, a nation spanning all political parties, when I do that and you then preface it, Mr. Jackson, Member Jackson, I'm a little disappointed because you're suggesting that what I'm saying or about to say is not correct without even getting the facts.
Are you true?
Yes.
I'm not withdrawing. In fact, I'll reiterate it. I've been here long enough to hear many persons come and give answers which are not truthful and subsequently confirm not to be so. It is against that background I make that
So it's not against me?
No, generally.
Right. Yeah, thank you.
I just intervened since these proceedings. I've made that similar statement on a previous occasion too, to caution members of the public service who are very experienced. They know very well that to be the case. It wouldn't be a news to them. Many others who don't operate in the public service, I find, might not be aware. And so for your and others' benefit, I so inform you. With that said,
My A's are my A's and my nays, my nays.
No, no. When your time comes. No, no. No. I still have two questions to ask. The first one regarding the governance issue that Member Paul will raised earlier on regarding the board composition. He asked if the two carriers had representation on the board. It would be Digicel and Flow. Was it the case that a letter was written to Digicel asking for the director, Gail Moss, to be removed from the USF board?
Gail Moss?
Yes.
Who is Gail Moss?
Moss Solomon, sorry.
No, not to my knowledge. And just for clarity, the selection of the board have nothing to do with the board.
No, I didn't go ask about selection.
Okay.
I asked a simple question: is it or is it not?
That is not true, and I can't remember what the person looked like.
No, you have answered. You said it does not, and I take your word for it.
Yes.
No, I take your word for it. I just wanted to verify, and you have humbly answered.
Yes.
So that closed that.
I stay in my lane.
No,
That's
you
not mine.
stay. You are well, Mr. Lawrence. You want to? I close on that. Go back to the question on the qualification. That much I've been spoken to. My understanding, and the PS can guide me here, I've not seen the written description and qualification requirements. But my own understanding is that in the case of USF, it collects these funds from the calls coming into the country, termination of calls. It amasses these funds, and then it is now charged to manage these funds. As you indicated earlier on, it's looking at over $900 million thereabout in funds to be managed.
No, that's not the.
I heard you.
That's
whatever
not
it is.
900 million would perhaps be in the context of the cap sites that you have.
I heard you.
Something like that.
I picked up the 900 from what you said. Whatever it is. Whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's not the substantive. The exact amount is not the substantive issue. But it's substantial funds that the entity manages.
Yes.
Substantial fund that it manages, and therefore the person who is going to be engaged to manage the fund to a great extent is going to be overseeing the management of the fund, among other things. And I think you alluded to one aspect of it, which is to promote the execution of the projects and to fulfill the mandate of the fund. I know, but overall it is managing that fund and the execution of it.
Yeah.
Now the promotion, I know many companies employ promotions managers and marketing managers and things like those to carry out specialized skills because the overall manager might not have that specialized competence which it is needed, in much the same way that the manager would not be the human resource manager, and so they employ a human resource manager or an administrative manager because they need those specialized skills in the entity. Marketing and promoting is a specialized function in the organization as against the overall management of the organization. And therefore, in employing someone to manage the fund, you would look at, Ms. Swell indicated, or others, the assistance given in developing job descriptions and by extension qualification given the depth of the program or project to be undertaken. The academic qualification would point to one having certain level of technical training, one, and many organizations would ask for that and some amount of experience in that particular area that the end organization is engaged in. Given that it can have multiple functions, like I mentioned, the marketing, the administration, personnel, and so forth. So if somebody, if in evaluating the scope and responsibilities involved in the job, and it asks for a master's or experience, it would be experience that are commensurate with what the training would have afforded the individual. Because you all know, as a professional, one of the virtues of training is that it provides a level of exposure in the discipline that prepares the person to take on the job. So while you might not have gone through the formal educational training, your breadth of experience would have given you that exposure that make you competent to carry out the role. So if you're going to rely on experience, the experience must be, or ought to be, I humbly submit, is an experience that would have exposed you to what the full scope of the responsibilities in that organization is. And quite frankly, one of the reasons why the committee wanted to have you back, to have you here, is to inform itself as to what informs those decisions, because we see it elsewhere.
Okay.
We see it in another entity, for example, at Petrojam, right? Where the incumbent have host of experience and technical training as the job requirement, but yet somebody way below, both in training and in experience, is placed in that job where the qualification becomes insignificant. So just to tell you, that's the reason why we wanted to get a sense. What informed the board decision that you would have made in the instant case? So you could just help me in that regard.
I guess, honorable member, you are burdened with knowledge from all the entities, and so it perhaps pigeonhole your view. Now, when we look at any organization, and in the life of any organization, if you remember, at one point, you only want a chartered accountant to lead your entity. I'm sure in your research you would know that. And then at another time, it was your MBAs. At another time, you shift to engineers. And now, we're looking towards another era where you may be asking for project managers to lead your entity. So it depends on the time and the season and the maturity of the organization. No, I'm not looking at any other entity. I'm responsible for USF. And so sometimes when we spice a comment by adding the others, sometimes, it is not fair to us. We don't find anything irregular. It's just that, it just doesn't feel right. Yes. So when you look at that, when you look at selecting now, we said, okay, this contract is a mere 2 years. True? We have somebody who is on board who have just completed his master's while working, and I'll tell you some more details. And I don't like to do this because I don't want to attack people. But when you look at the entity, there were no policies in place.
Sir, who you're talking about?
No,
completed
one policy.
Sorry, no, it's over here. Sorry.
Sorry.
There's somebody who completed masters while working.
Sorry, completed a PhD.
Thank you.
Sorry,
just checking.
Mr. Cross.
There's a slight difference between a master's and.
Oh, certainly. I'm just speaking as fast. Yeah. So, this is the catch my train of thought again, Mr. Yeah. So one person complete the PhD, Mr. Cross, while at work. But when we went there, with all of that, he had no policies in place. No treasury policy, no finance policy, no audit policy. The closest body I was an HR project that was sent off. And when I asked the HR director, where is it? Well, it went off, but didn't pass through her. And so you find a number of things hanging loose. So the first order of thing is to say, listen, what are we going to do? We have at the time, about $900 million worth of capex throughout the country, and with broadband payment and the support to the system, you could probably by now is about $1.5 billion in assets you have. Then when you do research, you have up to 240, 70 of them, it's not that functioning. And and quite a number of the others were in different phases of not functioning. So the entity had no structure. The board meet every other month, and so there was a number of things that need to sort out. So we had to say to ourselves, what do we need to do? We need to organize internal structure, get the policies in place, and we need to get the information out. Because, Mr. Chair, just indulge me a little. If we have the equipment and technology and not using it, when we are judged on the international scale, there is an index, the World Forum on ICT Index. When you're not there and seen to be doing things with all this money, it simply means also that you're not a priority country for investors. Now, what we would love to see is after this, sir, because of the penetration and the wide knowledge, how we rank now in the ICT sector and what it does for the country. And I hear what you say about the position. And, honorable member, the board got a job to do, and we did it how we see best. I don't think anyone here can contest that USF is not known and that the sites are not now being used.
No, but Mr. Lawrence, I think, I think the point that we're trying to clarify, and it's been going at you, but you're, generally speaking, it's a process. Mm-hmm. In other words, you have disengaged one person and employed someone else.
Yes.
The real question is, in government service, in a government agency where you have certain procedures, how is it that you're able to hire someone basically almost on experience? I think because I'm just saying to you, based on my history in government service, it is very difficult for that to happen. So I'm just making a point. And where I think what we need is, if it is in fact a problem, it is something that you as a board chairman, you may well be doing it because you feel it's the right way to proceed. But if it is not, it is a duty of your permanent secretary, of the other structures, to indicate what is the proper mechanism to do these things. So that's very much a point that we're trying to make, because quite frankly, there are persons, whether or not you may pick somebody because you like them, that may be, well, you can, but it's not supposed to be persons. It is a matter of qualifications. There must be empirical data. So I think, if I may, I see Ms. Buchanan wants to raise a point. I think, and a lot of this discussion, I think it may be important for her to have the ability, if members would, because it's unfair to just be having the discussion around her as if she's not.
You need to be here, Chairman. I don't know what she's
if
doing.
If not at all present. Ms. Buchanan?
Chairman and members of this committee, it's almost as if I'm sitting here and apologies and excuses, they're being tendered for my engagement to the Universal Service Fund. I saw an advertisement. I took note of the advertisement. I applied for the position. I was shortlisted. I was interviewed not once, but in fact twice. In that interview, the observation was made that there was the absence of the masters. However, on the other side, after having over 20 years in running business, having served a total of 3 years as director and chief executive officer of came out as Track Limited, served on several boards, including the Jamaica Cultural Development Commission, running my own business and having to handle my finances, serving 14 years combined in representational politics, and having the affairs of an entire division to handle.
That's the parish council.
At the parish council level.
You were in what area was it?
I was in the Gregory Park division, where I served from 1998 to 2014.
Which constituency is that?
I think that would be East Central.
Okay.
And Chairman, I watch and I observe, and you also mention about political affiliation. And I'm permitted. I have served my country. I have served the people of Jamaica. I did not consider service at that level at the Universal Service Fund to be less service. It was still serving my country. It was still going to work and spending nights there to ensure what was not done was put in place, so that a fund that was set up to benefit the people of Jamaica, they could in fact get benefit from that. I also will not apologize for having served in representational politics and being appointed at the Universal Service Fund, because I do believe that service in any capacity to your country is the ultimate gift. And I also believe that when we have served in representational politics, we should not apologize and we should not be blacklisted. So let me just get back a bit. So after I was selected and I started my job, when I went to the Universal Service Fund, even though Mr. Cross possessed a master's, a PhD, and I didn't, there are a number of things, there were a number of holes, there were a number of shortcomings in the entity. And to date, we have done so much work to ensure. I will not get into the details. And as the member said, we can provide information. But I have worked hard over these 2 years, and I would rather not sit here and it appears as if I was invited here for apologies or to apologize for being there. I have worked hard. Even though I was involved in representational politics, I have operated in a non-partisan way. On many occasions, I've had to communicate with even the former minister, and I've treated him with the utmost respect. I remember when one of our first community access points were being opened, I personally went over to him, and I said, "This is my number. I am here to serve the people of Jamaica. If you haven't held this agency, and I know your passion, when I speak in my staff meetings, I encourage them and tell them how accommodating they should be. I also speak to the fact and the contribution of the former minister. And oftentimes they can admit I've said to them, this might have been his baby. And let us continue to work in the interest of Jamaicans and not the interest of the Jamaica Labour Party. So I am just saying in this instance, and let us remember, Chairman, and I'll say it, the qualification does not do the work. Yes, I was well aware that there was no masters. But the job that I think that I have done in 2 years is nothing short of the work of a master's or more.
Just for clarity, you had said your qualifications were just... You had indicated when applying for the job, what were the qualifications at that point in time?
They asked for masters or years in experience.
Right. And no, I said, what did you, when you applied, what were the qualifications?
At the time I applied, I have a certificate in business administration from Canning College in Western Australia, Canning College, and also a certificate from Carmack in the University of the West Indies in communication. I also have from Creative Production and Training Center, Voice and Speech. I also from the Ministry of Local Government. I have a certificate in Community Development, Parts 1 and Parts 2.
You didn't have a bachelor's?
No, I didn't.
Okay. All right.
When I entered the entity, that observation was made in the interview. I did indicate to the committee that I'm in the process of applying to do the master's program in which I started. Subsequent to that, I started the program. And as I mentioned before, the program ends in June of next year.
Okay, so you started when?
I started the master's after I started the organization, a few months after I started.
Okay. All right. Members? Yes, I have Marissa and Member Stewart and Member Terrella.
Chairman, thank you. I'll be brief because the point I wanted to make was already made in relation to qualifications and paper qualifications and experience. But I just wanted to make the point that I heard you asking, which is the way, what were the guidelines, what were the qualifications for people here, and what really has taken place in PAAC is that prior to finding out what are the guidelines and what we seem to have zeroed in on was the CEO appointed without paper qualifications. That seemed to have been the point that was being belabored. And I understand what you said because in government there are government guidelines. But you know, Chairman, that is why very often in today's society in Jamaica, when you have something going, people say, I prefer to deal with private sector because X and Y, because in government something does happen. Because the point is that sometimes in government, as Member Holness did say, you do have people with paper qualifications, but they just cannot function. So what we have to decide, what I'm saying, we are here as members of a committee to examine what takes place and to see if taxpayers are getting what they ought to get for the funds that are being spent. Are we managing properly? So basically, what it is that I gather from the chairman, and I have listened to the conversation, is that what is under attack is not that as a country we have gotten less from what has happened, but we are attacking the fact that here is someone without a paper qualification. And I agree with you that there are guidelines, but we have to decide as a country, are we going paper guidelines or are we wanting to give the people of the country the best that the funds that are available for governments give? So that is just my observation. I concur with you about paper qualifications and so, but more importantly for us as members of the PAAC is for us to provide this country with what is happening with the funds. Are we as a people in this country getting the best? And I have not heard this morning in all that the discussions that we have taken place, any questions that or any discussion that has led me to believe that we have fallen short of good results for what took place. Thank you, Chairman.
Member Dalrymple, let me just say to you, you ended up in the right place. The fact of the matter is that there are certain guidelines. Persons like Mr. Lawrence chair a board on behalf of the people of Jamaica. There are certain rules and regulations that govern it and govern their performance in it. If there are criteria for certain positions and he decides to go outside of that, he has to properly document it, he has to properly justify it, please. And the problem we have is if we who are on the PAAC, our job is to look at efficiency of government and ensure proper procedures. If there are one or two things that have happened, he has done it knowing that it is not correct. in which case then this procedure will send that message that this is not proper procedure, and indicate to the permanent secretaries and the Cabinet Office and the Ministry of Finance that further training is necessary for these chairmen and that more oversight needs to take place. Or, so if he didn't know, well, that is the case. But if he knows and breaches it, that is a totally different thing, because it goes to his competence as a steward of the affairs of the Jamaican people. So the discussion we're having today is to really pick the mind and to see whether or not he recognizes that this, if he believes that this is a correct procedure, then that's one thing. But if not, and I'm saying these are guidelines laid down by the Ministry of Finance and Public Service. So for us to then say, what you know, maybe that's not, then if that is the case, if you do not feel that this is the right way, then as we are government, then it is our job to change it. But you can't put it in place and then persons breach it and you turn a blind eye to it.
Chairman,
it's unfair.
I want to agree with everything you have said, but I think what has come out of this discussion is what you just said last. I think we have now come to a crossroads in how we govern and how the guidelines are laid out. What you just said. Yes, it seems that there has been a breach, and if it's so, it ought not to be. But what has come out is that we as parliamentarians need to look at what we are using as guidelines, because what is important, what is more important for us as a country is for us to succeed and to do well and not just follow paper guidelines because it has been there years ago. Because what we want are people who function effectively and that Jamaicans get the best possible. And I am not sure, I want to say something, I am not sure that there was a breach, because what I gather is that the qualifications were or, not and.
No, say it, a master's or. And I'm saying that with all due respect. I don't think we need to belabor it.
But that's what we have done all morning.
And what becomes even greater import as a committee is for us to look at those that were shortlisted and to sort of get into the mind of this board as to how they arrived at it, because I'm simply saying to you that a question was asked. The political ombudsman had written to Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Lawrence indicated that he did not feel compelled to provide the information given the guidelines, but the letter was written simply because there was a feeling that persons with far greater qualifications had applied and had not been either shortlisted or selected. So we have to, in determining what's best for Jamaica, I think it is a question we should ask.
I thought, though, and I'm seeking your guidance, I'm not sure. This question that emerged from the Office of the Political Ombudsman, I thought she came in, or when it is that there was a breach of political code of conduct or something was going wrong. What was it that triggered her to get?
I indicated
I'm not sure.
A letter was written to her, and she wrote a letter to Mr. Lawrence simply, and this would have been
Who wrote that
2
letter?
years ago.
I'm just trying to figure. What I'm trying to figure out, I understand what you're saying, and I'm with you on all fours, but I'm saying the question that arose where the chairman was written to by the political ombudsman. I'm wondering what is it that triggered her?
I thought it had been, let me explain.
I'm not sure.
When this occurred, this would be 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, when this process was being undertaken, Mr. Member of Parliament Julian Robinson wrote to the political ombudsman to indicate that there were some concerns about this. The political ombudsman wrote to Mr. Lawrence. So from that point in time 2 years ago, there were concerns about it. So I'm making the point that this is not something that's been raised today. This is something that was, when it was happening, there were concerns about it. So, you know, that's the point I'm making. Now, I think that's where we need to go. Now, members, it's now 12:48. We have not had any discussions with Nessal. I don't know where I was. I have members Stewart and Terry Long. You want, is it particularly with Universal Service Fund that you want to discuss?
Yes, Chairman.
Member Stewart, please.
Thank you very kindly, sir. I've been quite patient. I just want to preface my question to say that based on the Westminster model, that anywhere you go in the world and you're to be employed, that qualification plays a fundamental role, whether it is in journalism, whether it is in teaching, and you have the experience, it has to be backed up with training, and that is fundamental. I'm following up here that the Universal Service Fund, as one of its mandate, Mr. Lawrence, had to do with the improving the quality of education, enhance the learning experience, and improve the level of passes in the CSEC examination, providing computers for school. We have seen where, over the years, these computers at the schools of the over 170 odd high schools, that these computers are obsolete. They have not been given necessary support in terms of replacement or repair or maintenance. Nothing has been done. I am seeing there where the policy there has been a shift, where it has been turned over now to the Ministry of Education. I don't know if that was a policy of the government as relates to passing over the fund to the Ministry of Education. And I'm seeing where there are procurement replacement of equipment commenced in 2017. We're now in 2018, almost the end of the year, and nothing has been done. While these schools are languishing, they are in terms of the technology. Why is this so, sir?
Respectfully, member, that is for e-learning, not for USF.
Is willing to respond?
Member, if I might just clarify some of the statements that you've just made. The project to which you refer, the high school project, is a project of the E-Learning Jamaica Company Limited, not the USF. The USF would have, in 2005, provided the initial funding for the high school project, but the implementation of the project was the responsibility of the E-Learning Jamaica Company Limited. And so the report that would have been tabled from the USF in relation to what would have transpired with respect to that project is what the member, I think, is referring to. The report would have indicated that the project was extended several times because of the addition of several institutions, and the total that would have been spent on that project, the total amount that would have been spent on that project was about 51 million US, all of which would have come from the funding of the USF. The USF's mandate is to fund projects, and so the implementation would have been done by E-Learning Jamaica. We did point out in the report as well, member, that once the projects are completed, essentially, or once that particular project was completed, it would have been transferred to the Ministry of Education. The E-Learning Jamaica company's mandate is to implement projects on behalf of, well, its main client being the Ministry of Education. And so that handover would have taken place, and a project document with budget would have been provided to the Ministry of Education to indicate what it would need to be able to sustain the high school project which would have been implemented. And that information was provided in the brief as well. So it is quite in order for the Ministry of Education to, as it has done in the past, make or submit a proposal to the USF for continued funding. If that request does not come, then there would be nothing for the USF to respond to. But the proposals have to come to the USF. They have to be considered, as I think we've seen, by a committee and approved by the board, and the funding would be made available. But that request really needs to come from the Ministry of Education in the context that the project has closed and has been handed over.
Yes, that means somebody would have dropped the ball then, because the schools are suffering, I can tell you. When I visit the schools, the obsolete computers, nothing at all is happening, and they're crying. So we're going to be having to ask that better be revisited, and that the schools get necessary support, since you are awash with funds. Thank you.
Mr. Terrell?
Yes, thank you, sir. Mic check, yes. First of all, Mr. Lawrence, you know, when we sit here at the PAC, we sit not as JLP, not as PMP, we sit as a committee doing the work of the people of Jamaica. And we perhaps have different views from time to time amongst us. And I say that because, from myself, I want to apologize to you, and I want to apologize to every single person sitting here today, because I do not share the view that I need to process any statement to any person that would seek to impugn their integrity or character, or to suggest that they need to be forewarned before I ask them any question. So for my part, and since we sit here as a committee, I wish to extend that apology to you and to your members. I thank you for accepting the apology, sir. Now, as it relates to the last 8 years, as it relates to the last 8 years at USF, because I understand that USF came about maybe about 2005, thereabouts? Yeah, about 2005. And you mentioned somebody's name, and I say I don't like the mentioning of person's name or anything either, but since it came out, you mentioned the name of a Mr. Cross. And just so we're clear, are you saying that whilst Mr. Cross would have been hired for more than 10 years, which means that Mr. Cross would have been there when a member of this committee would have been the minister in charge of science and technology? Correct, good. And are you saying that there was no organized internal structure as it relates to projects being planned, projects being funded, and the use of hundreds of millions of dollars whilst this particular individual was the CEO of USF?
It's just personally, I try to stay away from that. I'm just telling you what I see. There was no policies and procedures in place. There's no documented policy or procedures. The closest you have, I understand, was a HR one, which I've asked for and did not get. So we had to the entire policy section. We probably have about 8 or so policies we have to put in place, and also the board governance charter and subcommittee charters.
Wow! Now I find that very, very alarming.
Mr.
And
Chairman,
notwithstanding
can I just
that,
say, Mr. Chairman,
and
Mr.
notwithstanding
Chairman,
that, no, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I will continue to be as calm as I can, Mr. Chairman. I have only been speaking for 1 minute, sir.
Please, no.
Mr.
Chairman,
just a point of order.
Yeah,
and the point of order is that
Mr.
point of order is that
Mr. Chairman, I've been speaking for only 1 minute, sir.
Hold on. If it's a point of order, just give me 1 second. I'm going to let you continue.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, the member, by virtue of the question raised, has indicated, the chairman, that there are certain policy failures of the previous board and managing director. Is that what you're saying? And I would therefore like to suggest that we invite the former managing director to respond.
And I go further, and I just say, you made a very specific thing. I think what Mr. Lawrence had pointed out before, he has been there from what administration throughout Prime Minister.
I haven't commented on that.
Chairman, could we have a ruling on the point of order? Could we have a ruling on the point of order? Because, well, if it certainly wasn't a point of order, it was out of order.
Yes, please. Yes.
Might I continue, Mr. Chairman, because I
absolutely.
still don't see the point of order. I continue, Mr. Lawrence. And so, no organized internal structure, nothing on paper, no policies on paper. Since the new CEO was hired, were policies put in place and documented that we could follow to say this is the policy?
Yes. Yeah.
All right, thank you. So we have gone from a regime of the former CEO not having any sort of organized internal structure or policies set in place to now a new regime, a new era at Universal Service Fund, where the new CEO has now put in documented policies and an organized internal structure.
Correct.
All right, thank you, sir. I continue. Now, as it relates to CMU, because I heard questions being asked about funding of a university, funding of an educational institution. Could you advise the people of Jamaica, is it true, or is it true that CMU was about to lose, I believe, some $300 million, or they were about to lose some sort of world accreditation simply because projects that should have been implemented were not implemented, and funds that should have been used to upgrade the facility were not being used to properly upgrade the CMU? Could you advise the nation about this, please?
Yes, the member is correct, and CMU is a unique creature, right? Separate and apart from the other universities.
Yes.
And at the time, it was not yet university status. There are certain equipments that were required to take it to the next level, and having considered the document presented to us, we supported it. It's a long document. I don't want to get into the details of it now. But yes, we support it just as how we support a number of other universities and colleges.
Is this a new phenomenon?
Member Paul will tell you, sir, that in 2012 they changed the Telecoms Act to broaden it to not just universal access but universal service and all the things that goes around it, sir.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, Mr. Chairman, so is it that under the new CEO, the proper equipment, etc., was bought, purchased, funding required, so that CMU could have gotten that world standard accreditation?
You're spot on, member.
Wow. All right. Thank you, sir. And might I also ask, Mr. Chairman, because as it relates to let's say in the last 5 years, can you tell me, I know you said that the former CEO did not have any sort of organized internal structure in your policy, etc. Can you tell me even one in the last 4 years, or even 5 years, can you tell me one big project or project of national importance or significance that the previous CEO would have enacted? Can you think of anything? Does anything readily come to mind?
So the question is, the new projects at this CEO or the former CEO?
No, right. Before we come to the new, because you see, I just want to do a comparison. So for comparative purposes, within the last 5 years, which means there's two under the present, or two under the former CEO, and three under the former CEO.
No, please, Member Terlang. I think you are absolutely
going down the right track.
No, I think I don't know if you are listening. Do you recall how long Mr. Cross was CEO?
Yes, he said about 10 years.
So he was over how many administrations?
Let's see now. The Jamaica Labour Party would have been two administrations.
Well, 3.
Well, 2 governments, 3 administrations, yes.
Exactly.
Yeah,
no,
2 under one and this
so
one.
I'm making a point. What you're asking here, hold on. Mm-hmm. What you're asking here is you're asking the current chairman. You're asking the current chairman if he recalls any major projects that were done before.
Yes.
And he's saying no.
He hasn't answered us yet?
No, I'm not certain.
He didn't get a chance to answer, Mr. Chairman, because you had interjected.
I apologize.
We accept the apology, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
Yes, Mr. Lawrence. So 3 So before we get to this 2 years, the last 3 years under the former CEO, does any big project of national significance, national importance, do they readily jump out at you? Yes.
Just to jump out at me, because imagine I would have prepared for this. It was a holding pattern in that the former CEO would be doing the cap sites. Mm-hmm. The cap sites and it's a holding pattern. You just keep.
No, they're asking if you can step back a little bit.
Okay.
I think it means lame dog.
Please.
Yes.
No, please. Very interesting. Go ahead.
So what would happen before is that you just continue with the same process, the cap sites, and some colleges, yes, some of the universities and the cap sites. That's pretty much what it was.
Yes.
That's pretty much what it was.
One second. I think, P.S., is it you'd like to speak now, or we'll wait till he finishes?
So, member, in response to the question in terms of what the USF has done since its establishment.
No, that's not the question I've asked.
No, please.
I know the question you asked, and
right.
I'm responding. All the universities have received significant support from the Universal Service Fund. All of them, including the University of the West Indies and their outreach programs, and their
UTEC, Michael.
UTEC, UE, their Montego Bay chapter, and so on. Every single one has received an intervention.
And that's a
outside
good thing.
of the universities, the Jamaica Library Service, the post offices, the National Library, the Jamaica, I think, the police,
Ministry of Health.
every wide cross-section of entities, the courts, have received support from the Universal Service Fund.
And this has been going on for some time?
Yes.
Pardon?
Chairman, since its inception.
Mr. Lawrence,
So
you knew
apart
that?
from the cap sites,
Mr. Lawrence, you're aware of that?
Aware of the contribution?
Yes.
Yes, I did say it earlier on.
I didn't hear you. I didn't hear you in the answer. Sorry.
I didn't get a chance to finish. I was asking a question, and they said from the cap sites and the colleges and universities.
No, I'm sorry. I was.
I remember now you asked me a question out of the I just responded. Yes.
No, the question almost was nothing was. Mr. Terlong, continue, please.
Sorry, my question, sir. As I indicated earlier, and you will recall, Mr. Chairman, or maybe you don't, but whilst Mr. Lawrence was speaking earlier when he was being drilled by another member, I actually commended the USF for the work that they've continued to do to promote education and to promote the development of our tertiary institutions, in particular the move over the last 2.5 years to ensure that these tertiary institutions receive optimum funding for their development and capacity building. The question I have asked Mr. Lawrence now, having regard to the statements that there was no organized internal structure or policies in place under the previous CEO, I just want to know if in the last 3 years of that CEO leaving USF, can you tell me even 2 projects of national importance that really jump out in the last 3 years? That's all I'm asking. So it is accepted that the USF as a body, as an entity, funds universities, etc., and that they've been doing these, cap sites. Some of them haven't gone anywhere, some have gone somewhere, etc. I just want to know if during the last 3 years, because much has been said about qualifications and masters and PhDs, etc., I'm not getting into that bit. I want to know value for money from a committee perspective and national funding, national importance, things that were done to enhance Jamaica and our tech qualities, etc. So in the last 3 years of the CEO's reign, does anything jump out at you readily as it relates to policies or projects that he put in place for the benefit of Jamaica and Jamaicans?
But I don't want to make a judgment call on that. What I'll tell you what I know of are the cap sites and the various universities' contribution they make. As I mentioned before, the libraries and so forth.
All right, okay, all right. So basically, nothing new, nothing novel. All right, cool. Can you say though, under the last 2 years, as it relates to, because I've heard a lot of things in the news over the last 2 years. For example, public Wi-Fi,
Yes.
Wi-Fi access across the country, free to the public, because we want to make sure that Jamaica moves in the age of technology.
Yes.
So aren't those things that were done under the new CEO? Aren't those things that were done under the new CEO in terms of public access, so that Jamaicans, your ordinary average Jamaica, can be in a hotspot nationally and just get access to the internet? Them can log on upon them Twitter, them Facebook, them can go upon them Instagram, they can access the World Wide Web and get information as to what's happening across the world, whether it's CNN, BBC, all these kind of things. Aren't those things that were done under the new CEO, Mr. Lawrence?
You are correct, member, and I'm glad you're able to recognize and appreciate it, sir.
All right, thank you, sir. I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, just two clarifications I'd like to raise.
Yeah, before you go, Mr. Terlong, you're finished?
Yes, sir. And I must. I'm sorry. You're correct. I just want to say thank you to the USF, and in particular for the constituents that have elected me. When they go to Halfway Tree and when they're all over the country, that they now have access to public Wi-Fi. It's a wonderful thing. Thank you so much, and hats off to the former CEO for the job that she did. Well done. Thank you.
Mr. Terlong, I just draw your attention. I was hoping you were watching the clock. I know you would never spend 20 minutes interrogating someone. You know, I would never.
Chairman, I have a half a minute question follow up from Terlong, Chairman.
Right, and then I will
half a minute.
Absolutely.
My question is in respect of the campsites. How many campsites were functional and in full gear when the CEO, Ms. Buchanan, took office?
Okay. So, member, when I took office in August, I think it is November 2016, a total of 250 community access points were installed across Jamaica, and because in previous years, that was one of the main focus. Yes, the Universal Service Fund had given really good support to the educational institutions across Jamaica, and also they had concentrated highly on doing community access point. However, an audit was done in 2016, and that audit revealed that of the 240 community access points, only 70 of that amount were non-functional. So when I took up the organization, rather than counting numbers and just deploying, putting Wi-Fi's, putting community access points across Jamaica.
You're a little bit close. I'm not hearing if 70 was functional or 70
non-functional.
Was not functional.
So of the 250, about approximately 170 was functional, and of that 250, 100 is in Kingston and St. Andrew, a total of 100, and the other 140 across Jamaica. And of that amount, 70 was non-functional. So when I got into the organization, my focus was not just approving more community access points, but looking at the ones, doing an audit in the organization to come up with doing our research to find out why were they non-functional. So a lot of focus since I've been here. As a matter of fact, for the 2 years that I've been a part of the Universal Service Fund, I can tell you it's only 13 new community access points have been approved, because we've done a lot of work in terms of looking back at the existing ones and seeing how we can better put them in a position where Jamaicans will benefit from them instead of having them sitting there and of no use to the communities.
Where are you at now in terms of the total number of access points and those that are currently functional, one, and two, in terms of your campsites, how many did you have installed and working over the duration, over the 2-year period?
Yeah.
13 new applications, you're saying.
So we have
it's 13 plus
okay,
7.
so since I've been there within the last 2 years, we have really implemented 13 new application community access points. We have done a total of 300. However, those were in the system before. So when I got to USF, we have a backlog of over 120, almost 200 at this point, pending. So these are projects that are pending, projects that have been there. Some started their community access points right now in Jamaica, where the equipments are in. It's a completed lab, and it has never worked a day in its life. And this was implemented from 2008, 2009. And those equipments, some probably they have gone obsolete.
Chairman,
I'm sorry, just as a follow-up.
No, man, it's a follow-up. Permanent Secretary, the ministry has somebody appointed to the board of the USF, is it not?
Yes, member, that's correct.
Right, and that person would relate policy back to the ministry to ensure that the USF is operating effectively and efficiently. So in relation to the issue that the chairman raised about the period between 2005 and 2016 about no policies in place by the previous managing director. Could you shed some light on that for me?
Member, I have interpreted that statement with respect to policy to mean internal organizational policies. Because the policies in terms of the ministry's policy in relation to access and universal access and services would have been clear. So what has been said with respect to policies of the USF, I have interpreted that, and I might have been wrong in interpreting it the way I have, to mean that there might have been internal policies or organizational policies, whether HR, finance, investment, and so on. That is what I have interpreted that statement to mean, that there may have not have been internal policies in place in relation to how the organization operates.
And you're verifying that?
I'm not verifying that, member. I'm just simply saying that that's my interpretation of the statements that have been made.
Yes.
But it is the responsibility, member, of each board and the senior managements within these organizations to ensure that the appropriate policies are in place to govern the organization.
And just two final clarification. We had spoken about the role of CMU in the funding for projects, but I'd just like to clarify whether or not in relation to the campsites that were being developed through NESOL, was CMU a contractor as well to provide services? Yes. Pardon?
No, but if say for campsite or for solar.
Yes, it's to enhance the campsite.
Yes,
So
CMU.
CMU was a contractor.
Yes.
So can you provide us with the level of funding that they got for the contracts that they would have gotten for the provision of solar systems? And finally, I had asked earlier about UTEC and some projects about employment. Was the USF involved in any projects dealing with unattached youth?
With UTEC?
No, with anybody, unattached youth.
You mean the TAP program? Yes.
Any program?
Yes, there's a program.
Oh, so there is a program?
Yes.
How many young persons have you targeted and have employed?
Well, we targeted 1,000. I'm going to ask the present CEO or the acting CEO to answer that. That's an operational detail that I would love for them to expand on.
Yes, and perhaps if you could indicate what is the budget and the status of that project in relation to the number of persons that have been employed, payments received, and from where they are from.
Constituency, that's what you're asking.
I want to know from generally,
yes,
where are these youngsters from?
Yes.
Right.
That came through Parliament, though, you know, sir.
I have no doubt because I'm aware of it. But
Yes.
I need to get the details.
Okay.
I need to get the details.
The entity will get that. We'll get that.
Very well.
My follow-up actually had to do with the TAP program, and I just wanted to say that again, the TAP program, as it relates to the government's desire to create a knowledge-based society in keeping with international ICT standards. I mean, everybody knows the ICT industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. We've heard the Prime Minister and the government generally speak about moving forward, in terms of a digitalized space and to get all these data, everything digitalized, etc. The TAP program, that was another program that was initiated under this president, under the former CEO as well, as in the new one that's no former.
Yes. The TAP program, and the Wi-Fi, and that special project with the Maritimes, Caribbean Maritime University.
All under the Miss. Okay, very well. And from a national interest also, the TAP program, I believe it's a technology advancement program.
Technology advancement program.
And the focus was on unattached youth, getting unattached youth in Jamaica, training in ICT, and also to give them, employment as well. And this was between the age of 18 to 35, if I recall.
Yes, correct.
Yes, and Mr. Chairman, I'm aware of this because it came to Parliament. It came to Parliament, and each member of Parliament was asked to recommend persons for this program. So in the government's drive to get unattached youth off the streets, training, employment, etc. Again, listen, kudos to you and the team.
Mr. Terlong, I think where we're having a little maybe difference of approach. The fact of the matter is the TAP program, I don't think anybody in here would say that those are not good programs. And there are a number of programs that have been rolled out by Universal Service Fund. No, please. Over the years. And most of these programs by alternate administrations are good conceptually. But we as parliamentarians, and in some cases ministers, our job is to give a policy directive. So many of the Universal Service Fund was something that Minister Paulwell conceptualized. The details of some, whether it is a CAP program or the different things, are policy things that will be better for the country. Where we have a difficulty and what our committee must look at is the execution of these policies. So to the extent that you have a CAP program, which we all believe is good, and there is some difficulty with how it is executed in some of the issues we had with NESAL, etc., or questions that we're asking about TAP or are being asked, I don't think anyone has a problem with the overall policy framework. Those things come to the Parliament by the ministry. Our job as a committee is on a day-to-day basis to monitor the implementation so that the true intent of the Parliament is followed through by the departments and agencies that fall under our control. So I don't think that you will get any objection to the overall policy initiatives. I think the difficulty is more in keeping with the implementation, and our job is to ask those questions that will elicit a response. All right. Members, we do have a little difficulty because we are sort of impinging. All right. It is now 1:21. There's no Parliament today. That's the good side. The bad side is that we have not really had a discussion with NESAL, and we do commend Ms. Warren came, and we're very happy she's here, but we have not had a chance to have a discussion. And also the UDC were on standby, and quite frankly, I'm interested also to there have been some immediate changes that we may be interested in. So the question is, how do we proceed at this point in time? I'd love some guidance from the committee.
Mr. Chair, my suggestion would be, given the hour, as you have pointed out, we have NESAL to do, and join you in acknowledging Ms. Warren's acquiescing to our invitation to be here. And given that the chairman is not here and will be coming, it would make for a little evenness to just deal with NESOL together with all the parties rather than in a disjointed way. That's my suggestion. Because it's now 1:30 roughly, so doesn't make for much.
I don't know.
The clock is in command.
I apologize. As you can see, the discussions. It might be useful to do it that way, but as I said, members, if you just give me 1 second, I understand that I have received. Here we go. I've received an email. I've received an email from the Minister of Finance and Public Service. They just notified me, sent it a few minutes ago. It says, "Dear Chairman McNeil, please note that a brief on the first supplementary estimates and the fiscal policy paper will be provided by Monday afternoon, October 1st, and I'd be grateful if the PAAC would consider the matter on Tuesday morning, October the 2nd, in time for Parliament that afternoon. The Ministry will organize for the representatives from NWA, JUTC, and local government to be present. These entities account for approximately 90% of the additional expenditure. Sincerely, Nigel Clark, Minister of Finance and Public Service." So, members, let me just start from that side of it. If we are meeting on Tuesday, which I would indicate that we could set the meeting for Tuesday morning, would we be meeting on Wednesday?
Chairman, firstly, the Internal and External Affairs Committee did plan to meet Tuesday, so I think we'll have to ask the chairman to, if he would, reschedule that meeting to facilitate the meeting of the PAAC, and I would be inclined to do that. I would also suggest that we resume our sitting next week, Wednesday, to continue the work that we have been doing.
So you would
we'll meet Tuesday
so you would like us to meet Tuesday and Wednesday?
Yes.
Members, I throw it up.
Meeting because of my good colleagues' appeal to me. Just
I'm
yielding to her.
She has been sitting beside you and has convinced you.
Her appeal, she appealed to me in a very sincere way.
Then I must make sure she sits beside you all the time.
Yes.
All right. So members, are we suggesting that we would meet next week, Tuesday and Wednesday, at 10 o'clock both days? Is that the intention of the committee?
I have some other matters to attend to. If we were to meet Tuesday, my election would be that we meet the following Wednesday, so that we don't meet 2 days in such quick succession. I don't think the heart of some of our members could handle that meeting, sir.
I don't know which members. I don't know which member.
Chairman, I just believe that we need to complete what we have been doing, especially with the Ministry of Science
and there has been a lot.
Take it next week.
All right. So members, it is the indication. Let me just go from here that we will meet next week Tuesday, and we would meet on Wednesday. Now, the only issue is that we would seek to have a discussion with NESOL on Wednesday. If we could probably try and do it quickly. There is an issue, members. The UDC is here. They came 2 weeks ago. I'm wondering if members, I myself, I'm wondering, there have been some immediate changes. If we are not going to proceed today with this discussion, then should we not ask UDC at least to have an initial discussion, because we need to indicate whether or not the changes that have taken place are going to affect their operations and the extent to which coming to committee. So if they're here, I would ask them to just come. I would release the Ministry of Energy and the Ministry of Science and Technology. I asked them to come, and if we could briefly, but I'd really want members for us to keep it as concise as possible and try and finish by 2 o'clock. If so, Mrs. Warren, let me apologize for the and to the team for NESAL, but I think it suits us to try and contain the discussions. Mr. Lawrence and Ms. Buchanan, thank you for coming. One of the difficulties we have had, members, is that a lot of the discussions, it's the sort of inter-ministry, inter-agency that we wanted to have a discussion about, which is why we wanted both. So I'm not certain, members, if you're going to require Mr. Lawrence or Ms. Buchanan for the next meeting, or if we will just proceed.
Right. There are some questions that I'm sure they could write. They could send the answers in writing, so we wouldn't need to have them back.
Absolutely. But we were arriving there. We were arriving there. So the extent to which we have further discussions. If that is the case, I'd like to thank Mr. Lawrence and Ms. Buchanan for attending, and welcome. And would you want the current administration, certainly if only the PS or the executive director of Universal Service Fund next week? No, you don't need anybody from Universal Service Fund next week. I'm just trying to get clarity. Okay, so. Absolutely. So no, member. I just want clarity. So next week we will just deal with NESAL and okay. So with that, I'd like to thank the Ministry of Science and Technology and the Ministry of Energy for coming today, and we will see some of you next week. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, by just tweeting with members, I'm not sure if we have settled on Wednesday. So I think you need to reiterate. Yeah. Put on the mic.
I have a serious challenge with government agencies and ministries coming week after week after week after week after week and sitting down for 3-4 hours of the day every single week, sometimes 3 or 4 visits. I have a serious problem with it. I think it is very unfair to them, and I am adamant that we need to find a way to sit down and decide each person will get 5 minutes to question. When your 5 minutes is up, that is it for you. Because at the end of the day, I believe it is counterproductive in terms of the volume of work that gets done by these public servants when we have them here for hours on end, sitting down, doing nothing. It means that I hope they go home and work through the night to make it up back.
But Mrs. Sewell, why, your ministry is so big that we should just name you a member of the committee and done. Huh? Absolutely, I could name who too. All right. Okay. Pierce, you have heard the discussions. We don't intend to be long, There are a number of questions we do have for UDC, but we really just want to sort of set the framework of how we'll move forward at the next meeting. I understand Miss Heather Pinnock is the acting general manager. Welcome and congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
And Mr. Donald Hamilton is the deputy general manager with responsibility for finance, treasury, and investment. Am I correct? Good. All right. What I would do, Ms. Pinnock, if we may, and PS, you can guide us in this. First of all, I would ask Ms. Pinnock if you'd like to introduce your team, so at least we know who is with you. Yeah, if you.
Okay, Chairman, with me are Donald Hamilton, our
Deputy General
our Deputy General Manager for Finance, Treasury and Investment. Behind him is Major Peter Risden, our Director of Project Management, and Mr. Sherlock Glenister, our Deputy General Manager in charge of Corporate Services, and beside him is Miss Yvette Sybil, our General Counsel.
Okay, very good.
That's everybody.
And I will introduce the team from the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, under which UDC falls. We have Ms. Diane Campbell, Acting Director Corporate Services, Mrs. Judith Rob Walters, PFO, Mrs. Janet Coleman Howlett, Senior Director Works Policy Research and Monitoring, Ms. Monique Gibbs, the Senior Director Strategic Planning and Evaluation. Is Melissa here? Oh, one person not here. Okay.
All right, Ms. Sewell, maybe through you or Ms. Pinnock. There are some questions that we would have. We're going to really formally go into it at the next meeting, but we do understand that you have had, that the general manager has resigned with immediate effect. We also understand that there are some other problems that were happening within UDC, especially in SADCO, I understand it is. Before, we can go into more detail at the next meeting, but could you shed some light just on how you intend to proceed and how this affects the organization and why has this happened? Or what has happened, more to the point?
What has happened? Okay, I was informed by the board chairman Saturday evening that
is Mr.
Senator Ransford Braham,
yes.
That the general manager, there was separation, he had opted to resign. And that Ms. Heather Pinnock was being asked to act until the position is advertised and a new general manager identified. We don't expect, from the ministry's perspective, Ms. Pinnock was operating at the leadership level, so we don't expect any major fallout. We know the projects, what they are, and she was integral in the development and implementation of most of the projects. And I know we have Mr. Hamilton, a very seasoned person who will provide support as well, and other members of the executive. So I had a meeting with them when we met Monday morning as soon as I got in office, and I am of the view that I'm confident that they will continue to discharge whatever is required of them at that level.
This is rather sudden because he was here 2 weeks ago.
Yes,
to give. Did Senator Braham give you any further information on it? Is this something that we should be concerned about?
Well, I spoke to Dr. Graham himself as well, because yes, was sudden. Because
that's Dr. Graham, that's the
former general manager.
Yes,
I spoke with both, and I have not got any detail as yet. I'm supposed to meet with the chairman, because if there are issues, I would love to know what they are, so that going forward we'd know how to guide the current leadership. But I have not got the opportunity to have a sit down with him. But I also spoke with Dr. Graham. He sounded very upbeat and looking forward to his new career that he has chosen in his resignation letter that he made mention of.
Okay. There also were some problems brewing at SADCO.
There are some HR issues, that's the one. Well, I am aware of, and I'm going to ask the team there to give further detail. I am aware of an audit that has been commissioned by the board, and I'm also aware of personnel issues. And you would probably have seen in the media that
Yes.
actions have been filed in the Supreme Court regarding
In the Supreme Court, yeah.
Yes, regarding the personnel related problems there. But without compromising some of the investigations, probably Ms. Pinnock may want to give a little more.
Okay, regarding the personnel matter, that matter is going before the court, and we have no other details to share now. But there is also an audit into the operations of some of the properties run by SADCO, and that audit is ongoing. The results are expected to be returned to our board of directors within the next month.
This has to do with what was also in the media about Duns River?
Yes, it is a part of, Duns River is a part of the SADCO operations, yes.
So just for clarity, so all of this is part of that problem, the Duns River, the audit and the staff-related matters, they're all conjoined?
No, I can't say that they're related. I can say that there is an audit into some of the functioning at Duns River, and there is a staff matter that's before the court. I can't say that they're related.
Okay. Who is in charge of SADCO now?
The director in charge of SADCO has not changed. The director in charge of SADCO remains Ms. Blake.
But who had filed the action?
Ms. Blake.
Oh, but she remains in place?
Yes, she's in place.
So I'm a little confused. In other words, then what is the action she's filing?
I don't know the details of the action.
Sir, may I just, I think based on the briefs and the reports I have got, she is challenging the outcome of her performance appraisal process and a recommendation, a particular recommendation.
And those would have been done by her boss, who was the general manager?
Her supervisor. No, he was not her direct supervisor.
Chairman, may I suggest that we refrain from going into the...
Yeah, I don't intend to go much further. I was just trying to get some clarity as best as possible.
The matter remains sub judice, and we should...
Yeah, I think most of that was in the public domain. All right, Member Holman.
Thank you very much, Chairman. You know, I don't like to be parochial in these matters, but the member of parliament for East Kingston and Port Royal did have a very extensive meeting with the UDC under the leadership of Dr. Graham recently, out of which certain certain major decisions were made, and he was to communicate those decisions, certainly recommendations, to the Permanent Secretary in relation to some major concerns. I'm just wondering if he were able to do that, and we can take it that his departure is not in any way going to affect the program.
Well, I can assure you, member, that whatever recommendations were made, other members of the executive were present at the meeting, and I expect that they will escalate it appropriately. So let me assure you.
Yes, they were to have been escalated at your meeting on Monday. So I suspect.
Well, you know what, Monday took a kind of different turn. Is really looking, no, it would not have dealt, I would not have dealt with specific issues there, because the resignation is sudden, so I wanted to know what were the arrangements for the organization and so we will look at the other specific issues thereafter.
All right, Member Scott.
Thank you, Chairman. Pierce, the UDC has been integrally involved in the planning of the new parliament facilities for the area here. Could you give us an update as to where we are with it?
No, member, I think we had indicated that given the time today, they will be returning. at appropriate, where we can, because I think these are some substantive issues, and once we get into them, members will have questions and take us way past Minister Williams' lunchtime. So, so I want to make sure. What? Exactly. So we were only taking the general questions as to how it may affect our committee. So all things being equal, we will try and set an appropriate time next week to buffer so that we can give the two. It's intended that we do it on Wednesday. And yes, and Ms. Pinnock, you will head the team, Ms. Sewell. So we'll take it there. Member Jackson.
I have a little matter, Mr. Chairman, coming out from this morning, since we have the benefit of the PS here. In the document she circulated, in fact, while we were seated here, she gave a response to a question on PetroJam. And just a clarification, the request was status report on PetroJam Limited. And the report says the report has not yet been submitted, which is a report I had mentioned that the Prime Minister had indicated could have been made
Our
available.
interpretation was, I was asked for the HR, and I had said I would have spoken. Okay,
Well, so that's why I want the clarification, because further on he said, however, disciplinary action, which would have related to the HR. So I just wanted to clarify.
And I did tell the Prime Minister that the request was made and he has no objection to the report being submitted.
Okay.
Yes.
But that is
But
in
we will
respect that
follow up.
report that he had made mention of, that
Yes.
would be made available.
Yes.
But specifically, I'd ask about with the HR manager given the iron procedures and so on. That is to which you mentioned disciplinary action proceedings have commenced.
Yes, they have formal charges have been laid, and the process will progress accordingly.
Could you repeat? That's on what? What was that? Formal?
Remember at the last sitting, I had asked of the PS, the HR manager at PetroJam, given the breaches that were highlighted in the iron process, what was being done. And the response here is saying that disciplinary proceedings have commenced. So I just wanted to clarify, because I just looked at it after we had the earlier discussion.
You had indicated that you would that there was a process, and that you are seeking to.
I would have to be advised by the PetroJam board and executive of whatever action is taken, and we have been having ongoing discussion, and the last update I got, it's written too, that disciplinary procedures.
That what?
Disciplinary procedures.
Disciplinary procedures
are in place now. The formal charges have been laid, and they're going through the process.
Okay, so you'll keep us updated as time progresses.
I get the information from them.
All right, members. If time being 1:45, I'm going to now adjourn the meeting. We will reconvene at 10 o'clock on Tuesday. I'm going to try. I had a discussion with the Minister of Finance and Public Service yesterday, and indicated that we have found that there is a problem with these supplementary budgets and doing it this way, because what happens is that when we meet at 10 o'clock, just having our discussions, when we finish at 12:30, then the secretary has to rush in to try and do a report, and 3-4 o'clock you're sitting down. Not the fault of anybody, but just the administrative thing is not appropriate. I've asked the minister, in his best interest, if he would provide support, so that even in the formation of the report to the Parliament, that the Parliament itself have the requisite additional staffing and whatever is needed, so that we can get this thing back to Parliament in a timely manner. he has given that assurance, and I think the ministry will have a discussion with the clerk of the House, and we'll see how we can pull it together. What we do try to do is start on time to finish hopefully by midday, 12:30 at the latest, because we do have to have a discussion. There is significant support to JUTC. The mid-P program has been expanded. A number of things, so I know members will want to have a discussion. But the fact of the matter is that we want to finish by a specific time to give them, so that when we go to Parliament, we're not sitting down waiting on their report for an inordinate length of time.
Mr. Chairman, it's me.
Yes, sorry, Mr.
Something just came to mind, that the information about the disciplinary proceedings, so as not to seem to be prejudicing or influencing the process.
Please, hold on, members, please. Sorry, go ahead.
In terms of the report, the written report that I gave in response to the question, and which I have said that disciplinary proceedings have commenced, I would ask that it be treated with sensitivity, because we would not want any accusation that it is being discussed publicly and may influence the process. So even in reporting, I don't know how appropriate it is to ask, but it be given that kind of sensitivity, since it is just midway.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, I think, Ms. Well, at the extent to which we have any control over that, we'll hope for it. All right, so members.
Chairman, just one quick point before you go. I just wanted to have an idea as to matters that are currently in the courts. And I know when UDC comes, we'll have the same situation. Where matters are in the courts, do we discuss them here at PAAC, or do we have to wait until the court proceedings are concluded?
The only matter that I think UDC, the matter of the arrangements with the director at SADCO, I don't think that there's anything further in that direction. Certainly I don't know of anything more than that. I don't know of anything else that is in the courts. So, in other words, it is not the intention to go any further down the line in that. All right, so members, if that being the case, I'm going to adjourn the meeting till Tuesday at 10 o'clock. Members of the UDC, Ms. Well, thanks a lot for your time. This meeting is now adjourned.
Jamaica Eye is part of an island-wide network of camera surveillance systems designed to increase the